The Tennessee Titans have made some big changes in recent days on the coaching staff and in the front office. Some of the moves are good and some leave you with questions. I'll break it all down on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode, we're going to go over all of the changes that the Tennessee Titans have made over the weekend to the coaching staff. There are some additions in the front office as well. I'm going to go over the coaching staff first, go over the front office second, talk about the moves individually, those that I like and some that do leave me with some questions. And then at the end of the show, we're going to take a look at the Senior Bowl. The biggest college all-star game has begun their week of practice, and I'm going to go over some of the names that I think Titans fans should keep their eye on. Before we dive into all of it, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one because the off season is jam-packed with news and insights, and I bring it to you for free every single day. But with that being said, the biggest move that the Tennessee Titans have made over the weekend, in my opinion, is hiring John Fassel as their special teams coordinator. Now, we have talked about this last week when the news officially, well, not officially, but when the news broke, when the reports broke that the Titans were hiring John Fassel as their special teams coordinator, we talked about how great of a move this is. It finally officially happened, according to the Tennessee Titans on Monday. They announced that publicly. But John Fassel, as a reminder, one of the best special teams coaches in the entire NFL. He's been a special teams coordinator since 2008, so a guy with a vast amount of experience. He's with the Cowboys for the last 5 seasons, I do believe that it was. The Cowboys have consistently been one of the top special teams units in the NFL. You look at Cavante Turpin, who won, I believe, the All-Pro for returner this year. You got Brandon Aubrey, who is one of the best kickers in the NFL under John Fassel's watch. And actually, there was some news where Brandon Aubrey did an interview and said that John Fassel told him he was getting the job with the Titans and that he was going to trade for him. Now, that was said in jest, but you know, we can look forward to John Fassel being somebody who can not only right the ship for the Titans, but as Brian Callahan said in a recent interview, they need to not just get to where they don't mess up all the time on special teams. They need to go further and make impact plays on special teams and be one of the teams in the NFL that actually can win games with their special teams play. And the Titans are very far away from that right now, but John Fassel, one of the best in the NFL. That does mean I feel like it's Munchkin Land, and I'm announcing that the wicked old witch of the West is finally dead. Cole Anderson is fired. Now, I spoke with certainty when we talked about this last time that Cole Anderson was fired because that's the reports that had come out. Since that time, there had been some trepidation and some hesitancy as to whether Cole Anderson would actually be fired or whether he would be demoted to a different role. I expected him to be demoted since he does have a close relationship with Brian Callahan. It didn't seem like Callie wanted to lose full confidence in him. But after this came out, it is a fact Cole Anderson will not be back with the Tennessee Titans. So after that disaster performance last year, rightfully so, Cole Anderson loses his job and he's replaced by one of the best in the entire NFL. So number one, that is an absolute home run move for the Tennessee Titans, hiring John Bones Fassel, as you're going to hear him called Bones all the time. That is an out of the park, into the river, fantastic move by the Titans. Now, John Fassel had an assistant in Dallas named Raina Stewart, who actually is a former Oilers player and coached under Jeff Fisher for the Titans for a little bit. but Raina Stewart was also hired to be John Fassel's assistant. So, hey, it's hard to find good help. If he's somebody who believes that Raina Stewart can deliver the message properly, you got to bring him too. If Fassel comes to you and says, hey, I'm only coming if you hire this guy with me, not a problem. Sure, we can do that. Now, with that, Anthony Levine played for the Baltimore Ravens for a while, came over to the Titans as a special teams assistant, was a special teams assistant last year. He was let go because that's Raina Stewart's position now. He was a guy who I had a lot of hope in as a young coach who just got in the NFL and just started coaching. Obviously wasn't ready to take the big job quite yet. And again, if Fassel asks for Raina Stewart, he gets Raina Stewart. So not a problem there. Also, another name that Titans fans probably are very familiar with, Chris Harris, the Titans defensive back coach, cornerback coach. He was, I don't want to say let go by the team. His contract expired and the Titans didn't renew it. And Chris Harris was a guy who had a really good pedigree and reputation coming out of Washington, and the Titans brought him over in 2022 or 23, I believe it was, when Mike Vrabel made some staff changes. And, you know, the Titans really didn't get much better under his watch. This year they did, but obviously Denard Wilson has a lot to do with that. But the real thing that stands out to me that I remember, Chris Harris missed quite a few weeks during the season with personal issues. It wasn't anything that we ever got resolution on. We never got information on what exactly was going on, but I would imagine that whatever made him have to be away from the team for, you know, a couple of weeks during the season or however long it ended up being, the Titans might have just wanted to go ahead and move on and let him deal with that on his own. But in place of Chris Harris, the Titans are hiring Tony Oden, who is going to be the passing game coordinator and the cornerbacks coach. He has been in the NFL coaching for 19 years. He's coached with the Jets, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Lions, and there is some carryover, I believe, with the Lions. And Brian Callahan was on that Lions staff when Tony Oden was there. So a long-time NFL coach coming in the secondary with a little bit more experience. He did spend some time with the Jets. I don't know if he overlapped at all with Denard Wilson during that time. I think they were off by a year, but maybe similar philosophies there. And then Justin Otten, who is a guy who was the offensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos, was hired by the Titans in 2023 as a running backs coach, moved to tight end coach, and retained under Brian Callahan, but his contract was out as well, so they let him go. And they promoted Luke Stocker, former Titans player. He's been out of the NFL for a couple of years now. He was the tight end assistant coach last year under Otten, played for the Titans in 2017 and 18, longtime NFL veteran, I think 11 years. So excited to see Luke Stocker get an opportunity. Look, I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert on Tony Oden or Luke Stocker as a coach. There's not really enough tangible experience to go off of for Luke Stocker. Tony Oden has been a part of so many different places that it's hard to really pin down his level of success. But either way, I don't really mind any of the moves after John Fassel is hired. That is such a home run move that I'm going to trust that Brian Callahan is making the right decisions going forward to remake this staff after having a year on the job. I think it's smart to kind of tinker with things and address certain issues. And the fact that they hit special teams with a big name, small change on defense, small change on offense. Don't sit on your hands. Don't be complacent. Always look to get better. I like what the Titans have done generally with their changes on the coaching staff. But we got 2 additions in the front office for the Tennessee Titans, and I can't say I'm as excited about those. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you could place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We see some big changes on the coaching staff and in the front office. I'm going to dive into the front office additions here that, I'll be honest, I'm not that excited about at the end of the day, although I'm very excited about the John Bones Fassel addition and some of the coaching staff changes. But before we get into the two new executives, do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, there's going to be a ton of news throughout the offseason. We got to go over roster moves, free agency, the draft. I cover 200 draft prospects. I go over every position in free agency. I do a comprehensive review of the Titans roster and the moves that they could potentially make. You aren't going to get more comprehensive coverage of the Tennessee Titans and their offseason than you are here with me on Locked On Titans. So get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. But with that being said, the first executive that I want to talk about is Dave Ziegler. Dave Ziegler was hired as the assistant general manager for the Tennessee Titans here. Ziegler last worked as the general manager for the Las Vegas Raiders. He was kind of tied to the hip with Josh McDaniels because of their time with the Patriots. Ziegler was a Patriots cohort for quite some time during the late 2000 aughts. He started as a area scout and a pro scout and a college scout for the Denver Broncos right at the turn of 2010. A little bit of crossover, I believe, there with Brian Callahan. But Dave Ziegler is a guy who's been in the AFC West with 2 out of those 3 stops. I think it was Denver Broncos and then it was Las Vegas Raiders. So obviously there's probably a relationship there with Mike Borgonzi from having that close proximity and being in the division against each other. It's somebody who he's probably talked to quite a bit, area scouts, being out on the road. Again, Mike Borgonzi talked about how you develop relationships with these guys, and that's how he created such a good relationship with Chad Brinker. So I don't know for certain that Dave Ziegler and Mike Borgonzi created a relationship in that way, but it would be logical to think that that's how you put 2 and 2 together. But again, I want to focus on his time as the Raiders general manager. That is when he was in charge and he got to do what he wanted. Now, thoughts are that Josh McDaniels had final say in the organization when he was there with Dave Ziegler. Josh McDaniels was hired, and then Ziegler was brought to be with Josh McDaniels. So that may be the case, but either way, you stamp your name on these moves and you deserve to be judged by it. He was only the Raiders general manager, Dave Ziegler was, for 18 months. It was a season and a half. They got rid of him when they got rid of Josh McDaniels. He executed the Davante Adams trade, which was a disaster for the Raiders. At the end of the day, gave up first-round pick, second-round pick for a team that was not ready to go compete. I get why they did it with Derek Carr and Josh McDaniels. They wanted to go compete, but looking back, not a good trade for the Raiders. They ended up having to get rid of Davante Adams again. He had 2 draft classes. He had Dylan Parham, who's a good interior offensive lineman. Is he high level? No, but it was a 3rd-round pick because they didn't have their first or their second because of Davante Adams. But Dylan Parham's an okay player. Zamir White at running back, okay player. Not a real difference maker. Outside of that, he had like Neil Farrell and Matthew Butler and Thayer Munford in the back end of the draft. Then he finally got a couple of early picks. He drafted Tyree Wilson, who made some strides this year, but doubt he's ever going to live up to the draft pick that when he was at the top of the 1st round, drafted by the Raiders. Michael Mayer, good tight end, but immediately replaced by Brock Bowers when Tom Telesco got his 1 year with the Raiders. Byron Young, not the good one from the Los Angeles Rams, the other one from the Raiders, of course, who okay. Trey Tucker at wide receiver, decent role player, but these are not great drafts. You know what I mean? This is not great work right here. And quite frankly, the Patriots, during that time where Ziegler was heavily involved as the director of player personnel and all that, it was like 2016 to 2020, and the Patriots drafted really poorly during that time. And that was ultimately why their roster kind of fell apart and Tom Brady left, because they didn't do a good job during that time. And Bill Belichick was playing GM and head coach and didn't have good people under him. And so I am not over the moon about the Dave Ziegler hire. At the end of the day, he is not going to be the one making the choices. Mike Borgonzi is, and I'm certain that Dave Ziegler is a very experienced and, intelligent, educated guy in the front office. So he's not the one who's going to be making the decisions, but it's not like there's a ton of great stuff in the past 8 to 10 years to look at and say, oh, Dave Ziegler, that's one of the smartest guys in the NFL. You want him in your organization. I don't see that. So skeptical there, although, it's the assistant general manager. It's not the GM, but that's still a pretty high position. And then the Titans also hired Reggie McKenzie, who we were told was a front runner for the Tennessee Titans general manager position at one point in time. Thank God that wasn't true. He didn't even get a second interview, so can't really believe anything about the Titans coming from that person going forward. But Reggie McKenzie was hired as a senior scouting advisor for the Tennessee Titans, according to reports from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. But Reggie McKenzie is a name that NFL fans probably know. He was the general manager for the Raiders from 2012 to 2018, been with the Miami Dolphins, spent time with the Green Bay Packers before that. Him and Chad Brinker actually worked together for a little bit with the Green Bay Packers, which is how that relationship is there. Quite frankly, Reggie McKenzie was terrible. Terrible maybe, but was not very good during his time as a general manager for the Las Vegas Raiders. They went 40-72 during his time. They went to the playoffs once. I do believe there's some overlap there with Brian Callahan, who was with the Raiders for a couple of years there while Reggie McKenzie was the general manager. And Dave Ziegler, he went 12-18 when he was with the Raiders. So, both of these guys don't have great records in their recent opportunities to be someone who's calling the shots. And when you're the one who is calling the shots and literally it's your decision what you do, for them to be as bad as these two were, it does make you a little uneasy. No way around it. You know that I'm going to be optimistic when there's room to be optimistic about the team. That's where we've gotten in the past few years. That's who I have become in the darkness of the Tennessee Titans last 2 seasons. But I'm having a hard time being overly optimistic about these two hires. Because, of course, you could say, hey, they're not the GM. They're not making the call. They're not making the decisions. But when they did make the decisions, they didn't make very good ones. So what kind of advice are they going to be given? Does make you wonder. But with that being said, Senior Bowl is here. The Titans love drafting people from the Senior Bowl. That's been the case throughout Senior Bowl. We see a lot of players rise in their draft stock. It is one of the most important checkpoints and step-off points in the draft path. So very excited to do a little Senior Bowl preview for you guys as practices start this week. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast We talked about the changes the Titans have made to the coaching staff, to the front office, my up and down reaction to some of those moves. But now I want to turn a page totally to the Senior Bowl. The Senior Bowl is coming up, and throughout the rest of this week, I'm going to be doing Senior Bowl updates with you guys on measurements, which has already started, guys who needed to be this tall or needed to be this weight or needed this arm length. We're going to talk about all of that as it pertains to these draft prospects, talk about guys who perform, who have good practices, who have bad practices, risers and fallers. All of this stuff is going to matter very, very much when it comes to the draft value of a lot of these top tier players that the Titans should be looking at. I want to go through a list of players that Titans fans should have their eye on already, who I think could be logical options for the Titans at different points and times during the draft. Before we get into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL. I'm the lead host of Locked On NFL. I'm breaking down all of the NFL news and getting you ready for the Super Bowl as well. I would appreciate your support. Go subscribe to Locked On NFL on whatever platform that you check out Locked On Titans. But at the quarterback position, there are going to be two quarterbacks that I think are very, very interesting that are there. Of course, we talk about the Titans drafting quarterback number 1 overall, but they said they're going to be aggressive. Even if they don't take a quarterback number 1 overall, it's very likely the Titans could look to maybe make a move up into the first round with their second round pick to get a quarterback. They could take a quarterback with their second round pick in general. It's, not very likely, but it's also not close to impossible that the Titans look to take a quarterback in the mid rounds of the draft. I think that could happen. I wouldn't want them to do that, quite honestly, but it could happen. And Jaxson Dart is a guy who's rising up draft boards rapidly. Great downfield thrower, a bit of a risk taker, though. I think Dart is a guy who is polarizing because the great stuff that he does on tape is outrageous, but the bad stuff is bad. So he's a guy who Titans fans need to keep their eye on. Jalen Milroe out of Alabama, incredible potential. I mean, he could be like a Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels type player. Like, he has that sort of talent. But can he put it all together? Can he process quickly? Can he get the ball out of his hands? Those are things that people worry about. But he can make a strong impression this week. Excuse me. And maybe turn himself into a first-round pick. Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, not somebody who I'm super thrilled with, but maybe people look at what happened with like Bo Nix and these experienced college quarterbacks, and maybe they get excited about that opportunity. I don't know, but those are 3 names that I would keep an eye on. Wide receiver, for me, a couple of guys that I really, really like. Savion Williams out of TCU, 6'4", 220, an absolute freak athlete, can play a little running back. Like, he is an offensive weapon. I would be interested in Savion Williams. Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, big, tall, wide receiver. Xavier Restrepo from Miami. He's kind of that, could be like a Tyler Boyd replacement. He's a slot wide receiver. Played with Cam Ward, too. So if the Titans want to draft Cam Ward at number 1 and then pair him with, his college teammate, that could make sense. Alec Aomanor, who has a special place in my heart from playing college football 25 with him. But out of Stanford, big, physical wide receiver, can jump over top of you and make plays. He could have a good week. Jack Beck from TCU, another guy who's kind of a big, tall, physical guy. Tez Johnson, the speedy wide receiver out of Oregon, another guy to watch. I mean, there's a lot of names. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them at every position. I'd be reading the roster down to you. Some tight ends. I'm curious how the Titans view the tight end position and what they do and whether they're satisfied with Josh Wiley and Chigakonkwo and how they fit. Gunnar Helm out of Texas. Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. Mason Taylor out of LSU. Guys to keep an eye on. Offensive tackle. Also, I got to say, very early in the pronunciation process. So if I I can't even pronounce now because I'm so worried about it. If I pronounce some of these names wrong, trust me, I'll get there. Okay. Armand Membo from Missouri, offensive tackle, great measurements with the arm length, great feet. So the arm length checks the box. I would expect him to stay at offensive tackle. I think that's a reality because most of these offensive tackles in this class could get kicked into guard. Like, I feel like all of them, even Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell, are guys that could get kicked into guard. So if these guys check the box with arm length in this draft class, I think they're going to stay offensive tackle. Josh Connerly out of Oregon at offensive tackle. Jonah Savanea, Arizona's offensive tackle. Ariante Irsay from Minnesota at offensive tackle. Another guy, Emory Jones from LSU. He might be a guard, though. That's another arm length situation. But on the interior, Marcus Mbo, Purdue. Clay Webb from Jacksonville State. Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech. Again, Emory Jones, if he's considered an interior offensive lineman. Remember, Dylan Radins is going to be a free agent, and Lloyd Cushenberry is coming off a torn Achilles. I think the Titans are going to need 2 starting day interior offensive linemen next to Peter Skoronski, along with right tackle. So I know that right now, Lloyd Cushenberry is expected to be ready in July, is what I think he said at the end of the year. But, he's close to 30, and who knows? So I think the Titans need to get an interior offensive lineman in this draft class on defense, at edge, and D-line. D lineman Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, good player. Deion Walker from Kentucky, monster. He's like 6'7", huge player. If the Titans were to trade Jeffrey Simmons, it's a really good defensive line class this year. Really good defensive line group. At edge, Shamar Stewart, Mike Green from Marshall, Nick Schowerton from Texas A&M, all edges who are there. The Titans need edge desperately. If they don't go Abdul Carter with the number 1 pick, they got to address edge early in this draft. They have to find a way. Azariah Thomas is a cornerback out of Florida State, who I'm very interested in. I think he might fly up boards. So those are just some names that I think Titans fans should keep their eye on, and some guys who I'm interested in early on in the process. I haven't really dove head first into the college scouting process quite yet. But preliminary, those are some guys that I like. I have my eye on some names, I guess. But we'll go over 200 draft prospects. We'll go over every position of free agency. We'll get into roster changes here soon. There's just news for the Titans every single day, it feels like. Got to cover the news. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.